Feel empty? Like something is missing? Fantasia helps the disenchanted become enchanted by inspiring them to become conscious, holistic creators who dance with life. Each week we explore new ideas that expand consciousness, increase love, and enhance magical awareness. Now, here's your host, Laura Giles.
Happy New Year, guys. If you are a magical creature who wants to craft a beautiful reality, you're going to want to know how to create and lose utopia in 60 days or less so that you can learn from the wins and losses to make your plans a great success, right? Well, I didn't know at the time that I was witnessing this, but in retrospect, that's exactly what happened. And I'm going to share all that I learned with you in today's podcast so that you can make use of my experience. So, hi, I'm Laura Giles, hostess of Fantasia. Thank you so much for being here. If you've been around a while and haven't subscribed or joined my free group, what are you waiting for? The group is for the type of people you see me interview, who likes the types of things that I talk about. And if that's you, why aren't you in the group? The link's in the show notes. Check that out. All right, so what is utopia? Just in case there is someone who is unfamiliar with that term, utopia is a word that comes from Sir Thomas More's book in 1516, where he uses it to describe an ideal society. So everyone's free, everyone contributes, there's no ruling class or enforcement class, but there is leadership and justice, there is protection, education, passion, and morality, and all that leads to happiness. And this happiness mainly comes from truth and the ability to live as you want to live. Since you're happy, safe, and free to do what you want, it's easier to give, love, and show up in all the ways that create a connected society. Now, you might want to debate that. It's definitely a very superficial view of the topic, but the point is not to talk about what utopia is or whether it's possible or under what conditions it's possible. So let's just say that it is an ideal community, all right? If you believe that you are a creation being, what are you creating if not a beautiful world, right? At least I hope that that is part of your plan. I guess that some people are creating a nice love life and wealth and maybe beauty for themselves, but you have to have somewhere to live. Unless you want to live all alone, maybe it's worthwhile to manifest a lovely place for all of us to live together in peace, harmony, productivity, support, and love. So, you may have checked out my pre launch podcast on my trip to North Carolina to help with the Hurricane Helene victims. That's my utopian experience. And one of the things that is perhaps not needed, but definitely helps in creation of a utopia is a disaster. So that's step one. When there is a major disaster, two types of people come out: the opportunists and the helpers. Remember the lockdown? During the first few days of the lockdown, we had the toilet paper emergency. There was a fear that we wouldn't have enough food or water, and hand sanitizer hijackers came out. Some people bought these huge quantities of hand sanitizer and wanted to charge people crazy prices for that. Do you remember? And then there were far greater people who were giving water and hand sanitizer away. They were checking on their neighbors, singing from the balconies, and doing whatever they could to give comfort to others, particularly those who were in worse shape than they were. I don't watch TV, so I have no idea how the media was handling the news coverage of Hurricane Helene, but on X, there were a few people posting personal stories of houses floating down the river and how they lost everything. As the days went on, there were more and more pictures of homes and towns just washed away. It took about 2 or 3 weeks for power and the internet coverage to be restored enough to start getting a lot of information about the crisis, and that's when the stories were just horrible. The whole time I felt impotent. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how, short of sending money somewhere. I did that, but it didn't feel empowering or make me feel any better. So I had to do something. So I found a place to volunteer that didn't require me to jump through a bunch of hoops and commit my firstborn, and I went down with a friend. I didn't know what they were going to ask me to do. I didn't really care. I came prepared to be cold and dirty and work hard. And the first day, we arrived at lunchtime and were introduced to some of the other volunteers. Every single person that I talked to said they came because they had a shared mission of having to do something to help. We all wanted to help the people of North Carolina to know that they were not forgotten and that someone cared. We were all ready to give whatever we had, and that shared devotion and mission created a sense of closeness that communicated, I got you. I trust you. You're like me. You drove a long way and used your own time and money to give to someone else that you don't even know. Yes, I like you. I want to know you and work with you. And that was the vibe going into it. There wasn't a lot of time for talking because work was steady. I worked in the stocking of donations, and the system was really not great. I got it. When all this happened, they were just trying to get all the donations secured in and out, that kind of thing. And things came in randomly. But now, weeks in, there were fewer surprises and we could do with some organization. So I started doing that to help the people who are trying to get the donations out so they can work more quickly and functionally. And it was quicker and more functional because people didn't have to hunt and peck for things. It was clear what was what. I got a lot of compliments about the work that I did, and that's another part of what made Utopia Utopia. First, I was given the freedom to use my talents in a way that I wanted to. Nobody said, hey, do this. No, it was more like, here's what needs to be done, pitch in. I felt like I was making a difference. I could see it, and other people could see it. And those are two components of Utopia. Everyone wants to feel like they matter, that they're contributing. When that happens, they want to contribute more. It's satisfying for the helper and for those benefiting from the help. The people who were collecting supplies felt assisted. They felt like their needs were anticipated and someone cared about making their work lighter. So we had a shared purpose, a passion for what we were doing, the freedom to contribute, and a sense of teamwork and appreciation for what each part was doing. And there was absolutely a sense that our being there mattered. The second day that I was there were a lot more volunteers. I met a lot of them in the morning briefing meeting, and I came from Virginia, which is just the next state over from North Carolina. It's a 5-hour drive, and there are people from South Carolina, Missouri, Georgia, even Texas. So knowing all that made me feel like I belonged to an elite group of passionate people who were following their hearts and convictions. I was happy to be a part of such a dedicated group of people who had a purpose. There were nurses, heavy equipment operators, people with ATVs who were spending 2 hours one way to get supplies to just one house. There were men on horseback searching for cadavers with dogs. Lots of guys were from the military. And it was just a lot of people willing to offer whatever they had to help others in need. They all came on their own dime, on their own time, and had open hearts and a willingness to serve. Nobody was pushing anyone around, telling people what to do, showboating, or loafing around. Many of them brought supplies with them. It was really all about how can I serve? And we all did our part while minding our boundaries, respecting each other's contribution and keeping a genuine smile on our faces. We were working in basically a supply depot full of canned and dried foods, bath and body products, medicines, things like diapers, candles, solar lights, blankets. So things that everybody uses on a day-to-day basis. And there was such a care for these things. You could see that some people took the time to create care packages. Some were for dental health, some were for kids could have treats, some were basic, but people cared enough to put themselves in someone else's shoes and say, what would I need? Not only did people who donated treat their goods with pride and care, the volunteers did too. We were around all this stuff, and there was a sense of we were the caretakers of it, not the beneficiaries. And I couldn't imagine anyone touching anything because it would be taking out of the mouths of someone who desperately needed it. No, no way. It wasn't happening, and it all made it feel so very precious. Not only that, I felt I was around honest and ethical people, so I felt emotionally safe. I felt I could let down my guard and trust them. I felt that with every breath that this was an all for one and one for all type of vibe, and I just loved it. At the end of a long day with only short break to eat a cold ham and cheese sandwich that we packed. We were asked to stay for dinner to hang out with the crew. They still probably had another hour of work to go and probably another half an hour after that before dinner would be ready. So we declined so we could eat sooner and get in bed. I really would have liked to have stayed and got to know the crew better. We had a long drive ahead of us. So we said goodbye to the people that we worked alongside and got the contact information for one guy who we had spent the most time with. And he said he was going to come back, and we were committed to returning too. So we thought we'd stay in touch to have someone who was there to share experience with. I take people on spiritual tours where very special things happen, and the only people who can understand that are the people who are there with you. It's not about blah, 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 this happened, that happened. It's about a heart sense of being in a special place at a special time, experiencing a once in a lifetime feeling, and knowing that they know that because they had it too. So that's what it was all about. And this whole huge operation sprang from a disaster. People in need who weren't being helped and a desire to do something about it. And I'm not sure who spearheaded the whole thing because there were no egos. Nobody was saying, "This is my baby, I'm in charge." Clearly, some people were, but they were on the same level as everyone else. They were volunteers, they were accessible. We were all part of the team. It was just something needs to be done, let's do it. And people responded. People responded with donations and with doing the grunt work to get supplies and help to others. We were action oriented. We were heart driven and passionate. There was freedom to contribute in meaningful ways while using our talents and resources. There was appreciation and a feeling that our being there meant something. There was a shared purpose and a huge sense of community, both within the place that I worked and as part of a greater hurricane ravaged community. And this was despite having very little contact with the locals. For sure, there was equality and a feeling of being respected and valued. Everything I gave, I got back and more. And all anyone was doing was being their genuine self. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. Bam, effortless, utopia. I'm 100% sure that no one was intentionally creating that. It is just what happens when you're safe, having something meaningful to do, and are in your heart space. It's the embodiment of the Tom Bodett quote, which says, "They say a person just needs three things to truly be happy in the world: something to love, something to do, and something to hope for." I loved being there. I had something to do, and I hoped that my effort would make a difference in someone else's life. I think we were all in that space. So quite naturally, I couldn't wait to come back. If I had a trust fund, I would have stayed longer, but I had commitments, so I arranged to return a month later. Now, in the meantime, there are all kinds of stories coming out of North Carolina about cadaver dogs and horses dying because they were walking in contaminated water. There were talks about toxins in the air from burning debris. There were all kinds of unknowns. And the groundwater, was the groundwater contaminated with radiation? Was the water safe to drink? Had we put ourselves in danger by being there the first time? We were both sick with some respiratory thing afterwards, so we didn't know. But that didn't deter me. I was getting texts from our friend who was still there. The need was still great. So I bought a Geiger counter, made some safety precautions, and we made plans to return. We were thinking that we were going back to that place of camaraderie, abundance, and friendliness, but that was not at all what we returned to. When we were last there, there were 400 cars through in one day. That's a lot of people asking for free supplies. And we were giving them whatever they asked for. If we didn't have it, we put it on a wish list, and within 24 hours, it would start showing up. And I know because just before we went down, they were asking for plushies for the kids, and I bought a bunch and brought them with us. And that was 24 hours before, but there were already plushies showing up. So people were really responding to the need. So if they said, "I need cooking oil," and we didn't have any, we'd make sure that it was there as soon as possible. Either the community outside North Carolina would send it, or they would use money that they were getting as donations to buy it. So anyway, all that is to say that when we left, a lot of people were utilizing the service, and there were many volunteers who were willing to do the work. So fast forward to the second trip, 1 month later, and almost everything that was present during the first trip was now gone. I can't say how it happened. I don't know. But it wasn't anything like it was when we left the first time. A lot of them knew we were coming. There was nobody around to greet us. We were left standing around for about a half an hour before someone came to check us in. And they wanted all kinds of personal information that we didn't have to give before. That made me feel uncomfortable, but it wasn't too big of a deal. So everybody had name tags both times, first time and this time. But this time, nobody had their actual name on the name tag. They were like masks or status symbols or something. It felt like everyone was open, vulnerable, and available the first time. Now it felt like there was a wall up before we even got to say the first word. When the guys came around to introduce themselves this time, it was like, "Hi, I'm Inigo Montoya, and I'm the head of security." Or, "Hi, I'm Hercules. They call me Hercules because I used to fly the Hercules aircraft." To me, this did two things. It conveyed status, so it was a way of saying, "I'm somebody, you're nobody, you should notice me." And it also felt like a dog marking his territory. It felt like the guys noticed fresh meat and they wanted to make sure that they got in line just in case there was anything coming their way. And judging by the way one of the younger, prettier women was tossing her hair around and giggling, I don't think I'm too far off on that one. And it was disappointing because I didn't drive all the way down there and pay all that money to deal with that type of dynamic. So we were still focused on our mission. So we tried to find something to do, but there really wasn't anything. The community just wasn't coming in anymore. The system that we created was still in operation, and there were things that I stocked the first time a month ago that were still there. To me, that was stunning. I couldn't imagine what had happened to turn a thriving, productive, bustling source of community resource into a ghost town. There were still lots of goods. There were so many goods that they had expanded the storage area well beyond where it used to be. In fact, there were stacks of supplies just sitting outside exposed to the elements because there was no place to put them. Things were just being wasted. Lots and lots of things. And when I saw that, I felt disrespected. I felt that there was no respect for my time, my labor, my care, or my person. I felt that the supplies were also disrespected, and the community that we were supposed to be helping was also disrespected. And later we went into town to see how the rest of the town had fared. I had hoped that things were being repaired and getting back to normal, but it was still as run down as before. Not a lot had changed. The water, electricity, and internet were on where there were buildings, and some roads had been repaired, but there were still gigantic piles of debris everywhere, lots of homeless people living in tents, and open spaces where you know that there had been a building or a home there. I went to one of the places that basically served the same capacity as the place where I was volunteering. They had people coming in for supplies, but not a lot of supplies at all. They were rationing so that everyone could leave with something. And I was furious. There were clearly a lot of people still in need. There were loads of supplies where I was, and yet people weren't getting them. They weren't getting them to the people that needed them, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I don't know the details of what went down, but here are the things that I saw that destroyed Utopia. The first is ego. When I first came to this place, there was no ego at all. We were all one people, one village with a common purpose. Although there were people who had more authority and were managing things, there was no sense that this is about me or that this is my thing. When I returned, there was a striking difference. It was like people had peed to mark their territory and they weren't shy about letting other people know. I think it's good to have pride in what you do and to be proactive and take charge if you are in charge, but this was different. Initially, there was a "we're all in this together" type of vibe, and when I returned, it was more like, "This is mine, this is not mine." And it didn't feel good at all because I found myself trying to figure out how to not step on toes and trying to figure out the hierarchy and where I stood, and it was exhausting. Sexual conquest was another thing. This is not it was not a thing when I was there before, and there may have been some flirting going on before, I don't know, but everyone was focused on the mission, so there wasn't any sense of predatory or predator and prey like there was when I got back. I think that was a very different vibe from courtship even. It felt predatory, and I didn't like it. Another huge difference was the air of control. There were a lot of rules when I returned that didn't exist before. There was a check-in policy, the idea that you had to be vetted and approved, and all this stuff that wasn't there before. And it felt like a violation of privacy and trust. It was like I hadn't been there before, and my prior service and relationships didn't matter. And I felt like I was going into a prison versus a volunteer site, and it didn't feel good to be there. Hospitality was completely missing the second time as well. I think hospitality always exists no matter where you go. We're either good hosts or guests wherever we go or not. And if I go into nature, I leave no trace. If I go into someone's house, I bring a hostess gift, clean up, or contribute to the event in some way. Hospitality is the thing that makes social relationships easy, enjoyable, and reciprocal. I felt welcome the first time I was volunteering. I felt like an interruption of their private party the second time. The second time, it felt like we had lost sight of the shared mission. It was like each person had a personal mission. For some, it was about feeling important. Well, for a lot of people, I think it was about that rather than helping those in need. There was no sense of community at all. It was just individuals in the same place at the same time. When you hear people say that the loneliest place is a crowd, that's what it felt like the second time. Another issue was having too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Lots of people were standing around dictating rather than working. Granted, there wasn't a lot to do the second time I was there, but it's hard work when you see other people standing around. I started feeling like a chump after a while because my contribution was being taken for granted and wasn't valued. The biggest utopia destroyer was the no sense of community. It was every man for himself. People were there for different reasons, and each seemed to have a different focus. I wouldn't say that created dystopia, but it was skewed in that direction rather than being a place that brought happiness and peace to everyone. The thing that I kept coming back to is this idea that we are one. I see myself reflected in your eyes. You see yourself reflected in my eyes. And nobody can see anything if we aren't present in our own bodies. We all need witnessing, but if we're in our heads, focused on our agenda, on our fears, on our desires, or just distracting thoughts, we don't even see each other clearly. That gives the person a sense of being a non-person or not mattering. Witnessing is so important to feeling real and valued. We do this for each other. It's hard to be a community of one. People are social. We need to be open to be seen. And with masks on, nobody was really available to be seen. And we also need to witness and to reflect back what we see. So nobody was really there for that either. And I'm not sure what happened to the safety that lays a foundation for any of this to happen, but it definitely wasn't there. But do you know where it is? It's in my private group. I feel really honored to be in the presence of the members when they speak from their heart and share their thoughts and feelings about things. Nobody has to agree with anybody, but I know what it takes to show up with that courage and vulnerability, and it hits me with gratitude every time. I won't say that the private community is utopia, but it's a very cool place. And if you're searching for a place to be where you can learn, ask questions, share your experiences with people who want to hear about it, come on. It's free. The link's in the show notes. Just bring your best self. So we can stay on the how to create utopia side of things, but not the how to lose utopia side. It always takes two or more to make any relationship work. So creating utopia takes a village, but you can see what you can do using the things that I shared here. See if you can move the needle in your social spaces to be more cooperative and supportive by making a change or two. And let me know how it goes. I'm really interested. So thanks for listening, guys. Good luck with your utopia, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.
Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, why not show your love with a review? Thanks. See you next week.